Welcome to the Quillette podcast. Quillette is where free thought lives. We are an independent grassroots platform for heterodox ideas and fearless commentary.
I gave him a Metro card and a map, and I said goodbye. And I went one way and he went the other.
Well, clearly Lenore Skenazy thought it was perfectly okay to put her then 9-year-old son on the New York City subway alone. Now, I'm a father of an 8-year-old. There is no way in hell he's getting on a subway in Manhattan alone.
What you just listened to is an old clip from the popular CBS television show Entertainment Tonight, detailing the national controversy surrounding Lenore Skenazy's 2008 decision to let her then 9-year-old son ride the New York City subway by himself. Amid the uproar, Skenazy, then a writer for the New York Daily News, was dubbed America's worst mom. But Lenore wasn't put off, and she leaned hard into a campaign to free American children from what she sees as an overly restrictive and fearful style of parenting, which denies children the ability to have adventures and develop essential life skills without constant parental oversight. Since that time, she's written a book, starred in a reality television series, and co-founded an organization called Let Grow, devoted to what she calls free-range parenting. Most recently, Lenore delivered a well-received speech at the 2025 TED Talks in Vancouver, which is where I caught up with her while attending TED with my boss, Claire Lehmann. Please enjoy my conversation with free-range parenting advocate Lenore Skenazy. Thank you for joining the podcast.
Happy to be here.
And congratulations on your TED Talk. For people listening to this, we're recording here in Vancouver at the TED Talks facility. And in making the promenade to this little recording studio, we were delayed because people kept buttonholing you and telling you how great your speech was.
Yeah, that was a fun walk.
Because
I wish that happened every day.
I saw you last night, and you were understandably nervous. Just, people paying a lot of money to see this, but you gave them value. I'm wondering how often that kind of reaction comes to you, maybe more electronically than in person, where there are parents who are saying, like, I don't know, thank you for legitimizing the thoughts in my head that just kids need more autonomy. Like, do you get this reaction a lot from parents?
I do, but it's usually in the form of a story. Somebody will write to me and say, oh my God, yesterday my daughter, crossed the street for the first time, or I let my son stay home alone and I went for a run. Right. And they're just proud and happy. And I love people sharing those stories with me because then I feel proud and happy for them.
Let's go back in time a little bit. It's 2008, I think.
Yeah, that's quite a bit, but yeah.
You were, I guess there wasn't any sort of formal competitive process, but you were elected America's worst mom.
Yes, I'd say dubbed.
For a lot of people, this would be a soul-crushing experience. And I'm not presuming it wasn't a soul-crushing experience, but it would make them retire from public life completely. But you sort of leaned into it.
First of all, so I wrote this column about letting my 9-year-old ride the subway alone.
Right.
And then I was on an NPR show. And the next morning I was on the Today Show. And they give you a car home, which is already like this amazing luxury. And one friend called and he'd seen it. And I thought, okay, so at least somebody saw it. And what I didn't realize is that was the beginning of an enormous tsunami that has lasted, at this point, 17 years. Because later that day, I was on MSNBC and then Fox, and it was this whirlwind. And some of it was fun. Yeah. Everybody's sending cars to come get you, and they're making your hair look nice, and they're asking you questions. But at one point, and I don't like talking about this, I'll talk about it really fast. When I was home, I sort of fell to the ground, and I was worried, and I still am worried now, that saying everything was going to be fine, and I trusted my son, and I trusted, my city and my parenting and all that stuff was going to jinx it, and God was going to show me. So that part I did not like. I felt like I was asking the gods, taunting them with see, the world is safe and I'm fine.
It's weird how we all become so superstitious when it comes to our kids.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's really true. And the superstition that I'm very aware of is now the idea that if you are with your kids or watching them every single second, either with them physically or you put them in some other supervised activity or you're watching them electronically or possibly all three, only that is supposed to be considered safe enough. And I feel bad for the parents raising their kids these days. I mean, phones were much less popular when the 9-year-old who rode the subway is now 27. And I feel like those parents have this enormous burden on them all the time because they are getting so many pings and updates and warnings and reassurances. And it's like this drug that you have to keep getting more of it every second that your kid is okay. And without that, you're adrift. It's like a culture that has addicted parents to the need for constant reassurance that their kid is okay. And, addicts don't have a good life.
I was talking to a university administrator about a related phenomenon, I guess, and he said one of the great things about the days before the internet is students would have only occasional contact with their parents. And so when they did talk to their parents, it was more of a considered thing. It says, well, yeah, the first few weeks were tough, but, then I kind of got it and I failed this course, but I did well in all these other courses. Whereas now that we have phones and parents, and I see it in my own household, we're kind of in constant communication with our two older kids who are hundreds of miles away at university. And the way this administrator put it is that it used to be that parents would get updates on the climate at university. Now they're getting updates on the weather.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was
interesting.
Yeah,
that's really good. Don't you remember the song Hello Mudda, Hello Fada?
Yeah.
Here I am at Camp Granada.
Hello Mudda, hello Fada. Here I am at Camp Granada. Camp is very entertaining. And they say we'll have some fun if it stops raining. I went hiking with Joe Spivey. He developed poison ivy. You remember Leonard Skinner? He got ptomaine poisoning last night after dinner.
The kid writes this plaintive letter that the parents won't get for a week, but by the time that week has passed, he's writing, don't come get me, now I'm having fun, and this is great, and I'm fine. And actually, one of the people I talked to last week was a camp director, and I reached out to her because she had written something in a comment or on Twitter or something about how her camp doesn't send home, even though it's an overnight camp, daily photos. And I just wanted to high five her because most camps feel they have to. I mean, just to be competitive, just because this is what is expected.
Or they run an Instagram account.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There's an Instagram account, and the parents are constantly scanning the Instagram feed for pictures of their kids.
Right. And so the thing that's upsetting to me about that is, first of all, the whole idea of overnight camp, and in fact of even going to school for a day and being away from your parents, is that you are away. Right. And you can be more sarcastic or be more brilliant or flirtatious. My husband, who went to overnight camp, said he had a girlfriend at overnight camp 2 years before he even professed interest in girls at regular school, because it's a chance for you to expand into this person that you're becoming. And I really think that growth happens when we're not watching. And now there's no time when we're not watching. I mean, the cool thing about summer camp was that at the end of 4 weeks or 8 weeks, you come home and your parents are like, oh, my God, I didn't know she eats avocados now. And, she's shaving her legs, or just things that your kid is physically bigger because you haven't watched them growing for those 8 weeks. And then they're more mature. And that is the joy of parenting, is to recognize, look who my kid is becoming. But if you watch it day by day, if you're slicing it into microseconds, you don't even get the fun of going, wow, look at my kid.
Obviously, the organization you've created, you're very focused on giving children more autonomy. I do think there's a more general phenomenon with parents and safety. One little example here is I notice if there is some minor natural disaster, like there's a huge rainstorm or whatever, on Facebook, it'll be like, Joe has marked himself safe. Have you seen that on Facebook?
No.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Who's Joe? Joe is a seventh grader?
Joe is your friend. No, Joe is your friend, but it could be a 30 or it could be someone my age.
Wow.
And the idea being that there's something in the news, but sometimes this is useful technology, because if thousands of people are...
Right, or if there's fires raging through your neighborhood.
Useful tool, but I have noticed that it's kind of like all of these tools, it's sort of morphed into usage for some fairly insubstantial things. And all these people are marking themselves safe. Look, I'm glad they're safe, but it's just weird that somebody my age is reassuring the world.
I didn't drown in the rainstorm. That's so interesting.
What extent is this hovering and fear of harm coming to kids
indicative of a larger culture that is always
in a safer
thinking
world?
Right. So what you're describing, to a certain extent, I use a word, I coined a phrase, which nobody uses, so try to spread
Until
it now.
now.
Right? That's right.
Yeah.
Here, you heard it on this podcast. Worst first thinking. You come up with the worst case scenario first, and you proceed as if it's likely to happen.
Catastrophize.
Well, except that you're planning for the exact thing. I mean, I came up with it because whenever I was talking about putting my son on the subway, the question will always be from the interviewer, except you, like, how would you have felt if he hadn't made it home?
That's the first question?
No, it's not the
ask?
first question. That's a question later on in the interview.
That's very morbid.
It's so morbid, and that's why I call it worst first thinking. You're supposed to go to the worst case scenario first. How would I feel if he never came home? And then work your way backwards from that. Well, I'd feel terrible. I'd be filled with regret. I couldn't live with myself. Therefore, I guess I just won't do it.
Right.
So telling people that you were safe in a rainstorm is assuming that, like, you were swept away in a typhoon, which is probably unlikely. And yet you're already leaping to people must be assuming the worst. Let me reassure them. It's like, I wasn't assuming the worst. I was assuming you had to pull over to the side for 10 minutes while the worst of the rain came, and then you got back on the highway.
Problem with social media is a lot of my followers would be quite pleased if I got swept away in that typhoon.
Right, and go like this.
So, yeah, it's kind of like
next time.
Sorry to give you the bad news. Okay.
Jonathan is safe.
So, yeah, too bad. In your speech, which I guess by the time people are listening to this, they could probably see it on YouTube. We'll provide a link. You didn't give a lot of statistics.
Right.
There's some TED Talkers who there's a lot of math, but you did give one statistic that stood out in my mind, which I think, if I remember correctly, you were talking, the context was a store or some other retail space.
Yeah, no, this is amazing.
And you said you would have to leave your elementary school child by themselves for an average of 750,000 years for it to become statistically likely for that child to be abducted.
By a stranger.
Yeah, not by like an ex, or because most abductions
Right.
happen by someone.
That's so when we put the pictures on the milk cartons in the 80s, which I think freaked out an entire generation, it said missing or have you seen me, and there was never an asterisk like I was taken by my father in a custodial dispute with my mom when they were getting a divorce.
Which doesn't make it any less
horrific, but it does make it less random.
Right. Because if you're not in a situation where there's an acrimonious relationship with somebody seeking custody, it becomes different.
Right, and some of them were runaways. So the number comes from a guy named Warwick Cairns, who wrote a book called How to Live Dangerously, which I love. And I said, can you figure out statistically what the odds are? And it was sort of like him figuring out, because I'm terrible with math, how many lotto tickets you would have to buy for it to be statistically likely that you would win. Right. It's you don't want, like, how can I please get my kid abducted already? I keep putting him out there. And so he came up with that number, and I quote it a lot, because if you say your chances are 1 in, whatever million, or it's like 1 in 1.5 million, but you're always picturing that yourself as the one. People always say, I don't want to be a statistic. I'm like, yes, you do. You want to be the 1.5 million, right? Not the one. And there's something that interests me about our culture that I still have not figured out, which is that, there's never been a time that has been absolutely safe, where there's no crime, there's no flooding, right? There's just, there's no cars. I mean, and yet we seem to think that if the odds aren't zero, like literally zero, 99.9.
They might as well be 1.
Right. And I remember somebody wrote to my blog so long ago, and they said, I don't care if the odds are 1 in a billion. That's not a chance I want to take. And I'm like, I want to explain, we're not talking about a chance at that point. But of course, you always see your kid as the one. And so one of the things that sort of drives me nuts is that people are always saying, well, I'm trying to make cost-benefit analysis. I'm trying to be rational. And I would love her to walk to school, and she would get fresh air, and she would get her yayas out, and she'd learn the neighborhood, and she'd meet the neighbors. But if somebody picked her up and killed her, I could never live with myself. And so they think that they're making this balance between, fresh air versus dead. And of course, fresh air will never beat out anything. And so it seems like you're making this rational cost-benefit analysis, but you're not. How do I explain that better? It's like, how come the cost is always death now? Yeah. And when my mom was sending me to school, I don't think she thought, well, it's easier than me walking her to school. She'll walk to school, and if she dies, she dies. Nobody was thinking like that. How come we think that way now?
Well, I think it's called, is it the availability heuristic? The idea that since information is more available, including catastrophic information.
But it's not like my mom lived in a world without television or newspapers.
Right. It's more front of mind. I mean, in the same way, the example I'll give is it has never been safer to travel in an airplane. Mm-hmm. If you are listening to this podcast and you are on a regularly scheduled commercial airline flight traveling in Western Europe, North America, East Asia, your chance of violent death is lower, I think, statistically, than dying of violent death in your own living room. It's just
That's a good one. Get me that actual stat. I'll use it.
Vanishingly small. It's this is science. I wouldn't just make stuff up. Mm-hmm. However, that said, when a plane does crash, it is covered from 17 different media angles. And I'll give you a specific example. There was a plane on its approach into Toronto's airport. I happen to live in Toronto. There's a couple of weeks ago, a Delta flight, it flipped. By the standards of plane crashes, it wasn't a huge tragedy. There were no fatalities. And yet, my children and my friends, it was all over social media because, of course, people got out of the plane and started taking pictures. It was splashed all over social media. So as a result, when my 12-year-old we were getting on a flight, she said, "Is this flight going to land upside down?" Yeah. To me, that's a media phenomenon because our brains process images and especially video. If you tell somebody a story, it might stick with them or not, but if you show them the video, it could stay with them their whole life. But we can't go backwards in terms of that. But it almost sounds like we'd be psychologically healthier if we did. Well,
of course, I think everything would be psychologically healthier if we went backwards in a lot of things. But I realize that's not the world we live in. So when I talk about the two programs that Let Grow highly recommends that schools do, and all our materials are free, one of them is to send kids home with what we call the Let Grow experience. And that's just a homework assignment that teachers give kids. And it says, go home and do something new on your own with your parents' permission, but without your parents. And we give a list. Oh my God, we give a zillion things, It's like make pancakes, walk the dog.
These are age appropriate.
They're almost any age, and it depends on your kid, your neighborhood, their interests, your risk. I don't even call it risk because it's not risk. It's just what your kid is interested in, right? Maybe they really want to go to Petco and pet the cats, or maybe they just want to make cookies and take the cookie sheet out of the oven using mitts without you in the room. I mean, it really varies. And sometimes there are kids doing things as kindergartners that 7th graders haven't done. So we don't say age appropriate. They're just all normal things that kids could do. Anyway, the point is, because it is a homework assignment and because all the kids are getting it, all the parents have to do something. They have to let go at some point and let their kids do something.
It's an assignment for the parents almost.
It is off the record. Yes, it is. Yes, it
is.
Yeah. So when you've done that, and then your kid comes home and they went to the store and they got the milk, or they walked your dog, or they went to their friend's house and they didn't come back for hours because they were having so much fun because they were just playing in the basement and they had a big cardboard box, and they come home and they're flushed or they're hungry or they got lost and they're a little teary but they made it back. No matter what it is, the parent's heart goes whee because they're so proud and they're so excited that their kid did something. Either they did it great and that was fine, or like I said, they got lost or they got the wrong change or they forgot to get a receipt or whatever, and you realize that's not the end of the world. That's the freedom that allows you, in fact, compels you to do it again because it's a great feeling. And so the only thing that changes parents is we're not going to take away, multimedia. We're not going to take away phones. We're not going to take us back to, 1958, though I would like to. So you just have to re-engineer an experience for a parent of seeing their kid do something without them, and the parent feels so proud and the kid feels so proud. And then there's something else going on there too. Not only does it make it easier to let go the next time, it's exposure therapy. Obviously it does. But it also shows the kid that they know their parent loves them. They know that very much, but they don't know that their parent believes in them or trusts them. And then to see that, my parent does think I'm capable of waiting at the bus stop by myself or walking home from school. That is also the wind beneath their wings, because it's great that the people who know you the most think that you're capable.
It so happens there was another speaker today at TED who gave a very interesting speech about the need for everybody to feel that they are important in the world. And she gave a great example about, I think it was automotive assembly line workers, that if they're making, a little widget, their morale is like, okay, I'm making a widget. But if you show them a picture, this is where the widget fits in the car. The car wouldn't work without this widget. Their morale goes up because they feel more important. Mm-hmm. They feel needed, they have a social role, like they're part of a larger enterprise. Parents are like that, and I'll be honest, my kids are growing up. Part of me recoils at the idea that already I see this with my two older girls. Mm-hmm. They rely on their boyfriends for a lot of stuff. They rely on their peer groups. They rely on their professors. They're away at university. They rely on the parents still for stuff. But if I'm candid about my own motivations with my kids, because we have a third child who's at home, mm-hmm. there is a kind of terror about, what happens when none of my children really need me for anything except doing their taxes or whatever. Is it possible that part of this so-called helicopter parenting isn't based on fear of what might happen to your kid? It's fear of your own obsolescence as a necessary component in your kid's life. That if she can do all these things on her own, that's one step toward independence and one step toward me not having a social function as a parent.
Well, I think your function as a parent, having gotten them to that point, means that you have done a great job and they probably love you. So they'll still love you. And the thing that you're talking about, I'm just going to go backwards for a second.
So instead of like pushing a bird out of a nest,
Yeah.
you're scared it won't fly, but
But you're scared it will.
It will, yeah.
Well, okay. What's your choice?
This goes past the realm of the rational.
No, give me your choice. Doesn't fly or flies?
Of course I want it to fly.
Okay. So let me tell you a thing I think I've worked out, which is that I've read one chart on attachment theory, so I wouldn't call myself an expert.
That's one chart more than me.
Okay, well, from what I understand, when kids have a strong attachment to a caregiver or somebody in their life, could be a grandparent, doesn't have to be the parent, as even little kids, when they're like 3 years old, they start, they toddle away, and then the dog barks and they run back,
Sure.
right? Because you're there and they know you're going to be there. And then a couple years later, they're walking to school, but that's okay because they know you'll be there that night when they come back home. And gradually they go further and further afield because they know that they are attached to you even when they're not with you. And how are they attached? They're attached not only because they actually might see you later that day, but because you're in their head, with all the wisdom and all the good ideas you've given them and all the advice. And in their heart, they know that you love them. You're not going to abandon them, right? And so you are always going to be with your child, even when they fly. And I think what's been sort of interrupting that is the availability of constant contact. Because if you're walking to school and you are scared by the dog and you have a phone, you could say, I'm scared, help me. And then if your parents are checking in on you, honey, are you okay? How'd you do on that quiz today? Are you going to be home at 4:05 or 4:07?
Right.
It doesn't allow the kid to sort of breathe and be okay on their own, having internalized you, because now you are external. You're always available. Attachment theory works for parents too. At first, you do see the kid and you are holding them close and they do run back to you and they do want to cuddle. And then they go off with their peers and then they go off with their spouse. And thus it has always been. And you are still a family and you still really matter to each other, but you have different roles.
In your TED Talk, you gave the example of boys playing in the park, and let's say they organize a game of baseball. And they say, okay, well, this tree trunk will be first base, and second base will be that hole in the ground. And then there's all these arguments.
That was not a foul ball. Yes,
Yeah.
it was.
I know about this because I live near a park, and I take my dog there. And there are boys, they're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and they're doing this.
Oh, that's so great.
And it's so annoying. No, because they never actually get to the
You
game.
never get to the game.
They
Yeah.
just scream at each other about rules.
That's
about-
not fair.
Yeah, and I feel like saying to them, can one of your parents just come?
Oh, no.
Not because they're in danger.
No, I know, just because it's so
So
inefficient.
you'll shut up and you'll actually play baseball instead of arguing about whether second base is this hole or that hole. Like it's so annoying.
It is annoying, which is why we can't be there.
Okay.
The only solution I've come up with for how do we help kids, grow up and learn how to give and take and understand each other and compromise and explain and do all this great stuff, focus, is if we're not there. Because if we are there, you're right. We would say, guys, this is inefficient. You're wasting all your time. It's getting dark. How about this is first base, this is second base, this is third base, and I'll be the umpire. And you know what? Then you get to the game faster.
Sure.
And in the meantime, what you've missed is all that interstitial stuff, all the annoying stuff that actually is the enriched uranium of play. Mother Nature or evolution or whoever put this drive to play into kids so that they would argue and finally have to give up or come up with another way or get buy-in for my side or, come up with a totally different game or leave and start my own game and you guys can play. All those things are solutions to problems. You're learning how to make something happen, how to pivot if it doesn't work for you, how to deal with the frustration when it doesn't work because you desperately want to play. So, okay, I'll be on the bad team. Or, okay, I'll say that was a foul ball, even though I know it wasn't, so that they can get to the fun. The push to get to the fun, this drive, is what Mother Nature put in so that you would do all that hard work of learning how to be a human.
And even practicing how to be a parent. I think you gave the example of how, when a 12-year-old plays with a 5-year-old, they'll throw the ball very softly and the 5-year-old will tap the ball back and act like they hit a home run. And the 12-year-old will also be ecstatic because they've gotten a glimpse of the pleasure that comes from
empathy. Let me tell you, so some people studied, these two professors studied a Let Grow play club. That's where kids stay after school just to play, figure out what they want to do on their own. And when they interviewed the kids after, I don't know, a semester or a year of this, the older kids were saying things like, I really liked when I taught a kid blah, 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 a little kid something, or when I saw a lonely kid and I started playing tag with her, or when I let them get a home run. And what they were saying without realizing it is, empathy is a great feeling. It's this mature, wonderful, generosity of spirit that I never felt before because I was only playing me against kids exactly my age, and it's who's the fastest, who's the strongest. But now it's me being a leader. One of the great things about mixed age play is that you get to be a leader even if you're not much of a leader. But if you're the 12-year-old with a bunch of 7 and 5-year-olds, you are the god. And Peter Gray, who I learned all this from, Gray, he is a co-founder of Let Grow with me, and he's a psychology professor at Boston College, and he wrote the book Free to Learn. And he always says that when you have a bunch of 7-year-olds together trying to play cards, it's a disaster. It does not work. They can't do it. But if you have 7-year-olds playing with 9-year-olds, it sounds terrible. It sounds like your baseball. It's like, hold up your cards. Oh, my God, don't throw down your queen. Here, put that back in your hand. You need to save your queen. And it's not, it's not kind words necessarily. It's not the tone you might wish your kids were using, but they are explaining something to each other. And the older kids are learning how to be teachers, and the younger kids look up to these 9-year-olds as gods. And so they start holding their cards up, which means executive function and focus, and the game goes on. And to think that the game is what that time is about is absolutely old, right? Thinking like a grown-up. And that's why grown-ups can't be with kids when they're playing, because inevitably we will see, you guys are wasting your time, or you're being mean, or don't use those words, or here, let me do it for you.
So specifically, anti-bullying has become a huge thing.
Right. Well, one of the things that Peter Gray always says is that when you have mixed ages, there is a lot less bullying because the older kids are generally nicer when there are younger kids around. There's something kicks in that is making you not want to look like a jerk or a baby to the little kids. And wait, I wanted to say one other reason that mixed age play is less bullying is because it also allows you to find your friends, right? You're not stuck with just your tormentors in 3rd grade. You can go give piggyback rides to the kindergartners, or you could go hang out with that sensitive 5th grader who wants to spend time with you. And so you're not stuck.
Putting the issue of mixed age play aside, I guess I'm thinking of going back to this example of like these super annoying kids who play in the park and never get around to playing baseball. If one of those were my kids, I'd be scared that in the course of this screaming that they're doing, there'd be bullying, and that things would get out of hand, and it would escalate to the level where one kid never wants to play baseball again because he's being treated so brutally by the others. And that would be hovering in my mind as well. I won't supervise them, but I'll just kind of watch them just to make sure no bullying takes place.
You're not supervising, but you're watching.
Yeah. So, but like, to me, anti-bullying, I guess I support this, has become a huge theme in schools, camps, everything, because bullying can scar you for life.
Bullying is bad.
But anti-bullying only really works when an adult is hovering there, like, because kids don't really. Do kids enforce anti-bullying mantras? I guess they don't.
Well, let's go back to your fear. You're hearing these kids arguing about whether the ball is in or out, or is the tree first base, or
that's
is that
not
too
bullying.
close?
I'm thinking how
No. But you escalated it to the point where nobody wants to play with this kid again. That's worst first thinking, right? That's going to the very worst case scenario. They're arguing. Sometimes it's going to become bullying. It's going to become such horrible bullying that the child will be ostracized for life and probably scarred and maybe worse.
Right.
So have you listened? Has it escalated to that?
No. I guess, yeah, I'm catastrophizing. And they're not even my kids. I'm catastrophizing on behalf of someone else's kids.
Maybe take a walk.
Okay, so now that we've established how neurotic I am.
No, it's not neurotic. This is why I keep saying that adults can't be with kids all the time, because inevitably we will see them behaving not like we do. They're not being kind. They're not taking turns. They're not using their indoor voices. And so we step in to optimize. And sometimes that's fine. I mean, we're around them enough that we can say, don't hog the sweet potatoes. Nobody hogs the sweet potatoes. Right? Yeah, that's bad. Don't hog the M&Ms. But some of the time has to be without us, so they get the tools that we now have, right? How to get past the block of like, now it's my turn, now it's your turn. They will squabble. So I have to say that There's this woman in England, Penny Wilson. She's a play worker, which is somebody who basically works at playgrounds facilitating play, trying to be unobtrusive. And her phrase, not mine, is that fun is the orgasm of play. And what she means is that kids will do anything to get to the fun. They will work really hard. They will subsume their own desires if they could just get to that fun part. And Mother Nature put that drive in, the same reason there's the food drive and the sex drive, because these are the things kids need to live. And so when I say that when you give kids back free play without us watching, without us helping, without us listening, because we will jump in if we are listening, they get this nutrient that they have been starved for. I mean, we hear it over and over again. One school they've been doing the Let Grow Play Club after school free play for 5 years now. And the incidents of bullying have plummeted. The incidents of kids being sent to the principal's office for bad behavior, and attendance is up. So people are happier because they're getting something that they desperately need. Just like when we started school lunch programs, kids weren't starving, and so they could do better on their tests. Well, give them back what they're starving from now.
In a word, is it agency you're giving them back?
Yeah, I'm giving them agency and also some fun.
Sure. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about your career as a reality show.
You could be remiss. Nobody remembers it.
Well, the show was called World's Worst Mom.
Yeah.
It was on Discovery Life. Never heard of that.
No, nobody did. That was the problem.
Okay.
Right. Discovery, I think, had 12 channels. I think this was the 13th.
Okay. So the idea here was that you would kind of...
I'll tell you, it was me going to the Discovery people, interviewed 2,000 families, found the 13 who were the most overprotective, right, who were willing to have me come visit and try to...
In a way, they weren't world's worst mom. It was almost like...
No, it's me. I'm the world's worst mom.
Okay, right? But in a way, like according to that idiom, they were in a way the world's best mom because they were super protective.
First mom I worked with had a 10-year-old and she still fed him in his mouth.
Yeah, that's weird.
That is really weird. Another mom had a son. She got him. He was allowed to get a skateboard. He was 8, but he could only stand on it on the grass. Okay. A mom with a 10-year-old girl would take her into the ladies' room if they were, out at a store or whatever, and then go into the stall with her so she'd be safe. So these were parents who I had no idea what to do with because I'm not a psychologist. I'm a reporter. But luckily, the producers said, here's what you're going to do. Today, you're going to sit with the mom while you make the kid walk to the store, or you're going to sit with the parents while, they go to the mall, or you're going to teach. There was a 15-year-old boy who'd never lit a match. His dad was a firefighter, and you're going to show him how to light a match. And what was amazing to me is that first family with the mom who fed the kid in his mouth. One of the things was he hadn't ridden a bike ever, 10 years old. And so I had to give him a bike and watch him try to learn how to ride a bike on camera, which I felt bad for him because I knew that his classmates were going to see him and talk about bullying. I'd be worried about him being laughed at. But I had no choice either. I was like the pawn of the producers who were very smart. Anyways, he learns how to ride a bike. His stepfather helps him. I had no idea how to do it. But when the mom came home, and this is the mom who hadn't let him ever walk to school, ride a bike, blah, 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 couldn't pour milk, she ran into the house. And of course, the cameras weren't there, which is why I feel compelled to tell the story. And she goes in and her mother is there, the grandmother is there. And she says, guess what, Mom? Sammy can ride a bike. And the grandmother's Russian grandmother goes, what? Our Sammy ride bike? Yes, our Sammy is riding a bike. They danced around. Sammy can ride a bike. Sammy can ride a bike. And I was like, wait a minute, you are the ones who wouldn't let him ride a bike. And that's when I realized this is easy. It is so easy to break through what looks through this like 3-foot layer of ice of fear is actually thin ice. And you can break it with the pride and joy of a parent seeing their kid grow. And that's what has propelled me to this point, because if it weren't easy, if I thought that this was an impossible task, I would give up. But actually, all you have to do is have a couple of experiences of letting your kid do something on their own, and you will change. And if there's a bunch of you changing at once, which maybe this podcast will help happen, then you've changed the norms, and the kids are outside playing, and you're inside not listening to them. You have your headphones on, you're doing a podcast, you don't have to listen to them bicker outside, and eventually they will have one at bat.
Lenore Skenazy's organization is called Let Grow. Thank you so much for joining the Quillette podcast.
Hey, Jonathan, thank you. And thank you for Quillette.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Quillette podcast. For more Quillette content, please visit us at quillette.com.